So the snowflakes are really coming after David Chappelle in his latest Netflix stand-up routine called Sticks and Stones, which of course means you gotta check it out. Unfortunately, I can't recommend it because it's a bit vulgar, but I can give you the top 5 reasons why this is one of the most impactful social commentary events we've seen in quite a while, and why it's causing the identity politics gestapo to go absolutely bonkers, and we're starting right now. Hi, my name is Kyle, and welcome to my channel where we take culture, TV, and movies, and we filter it right. If this is your first time here, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss any future content. Now, like I said in my introduction, really quickly, the Dave Chappelle stand-up routine called Sticks and Stones, which dropped a few days ago, is driving the left absolutely insane. I'm going to tell you the 5 reasons why I feel this is so impactful and why it is so important and really necessary. And to get to that point quickly, I'm going to show you really quickly here the backlash we're seeing now on the internet. Now, this is Forbes saying here that Dave Chappelle's Sticks and Stones aims to offend and fails. If you do a search on Google, you see a bunch of stuff here. Shock and bore, Sticks and Stones aims to offend, fails to do the job. Bunch of backlash in the community right now on the left coming after Dave Chappelle as to why he's out of touch and why he's trying to be offensive. And I'm going to talk about that. But right now, I wanted to say that watching this morning was interesting in the sense that the content of it is pretty vulgar, pretty disgusting, and I don't condone a lot of it. But what he's ended up doing is he's being himself, he's telling what he feels is the truth, and he drops down some serious bombs and puts it in a way to a predominantly black audience in Atlanta, and to highlight through comedy the hypocrisy of the left and how things are going and how we have to put the brakes on this stuff because we're going to be destroying each other over words. And that's why his title is Sticks and Stones. And so let's get into this. I'm going to go over reason number 1 as to why I feel this is the takeaway that he gave. The first thing is, and by the way, I'm not going to give any spoilers per se, but I want you to have the ability to see this video and not watch it and still be able to talk about what happened. If you want to go see it, that's on you, but I'm not recommending it. But I do want to say these reasons here so that you can get an idea of what the messages he's trying to put across. The first message he says here, he starts off with Anthony Bourdain's suicide, and he talks about being appreciative of life. He contrasts his lifestyle and his suicide versus a friend of his who had a lot of things bad happen to him but didn't commit suicide. But how he was appreciative of life and that was living and coping through that situation. That's the first point I want to talk about. And that was really a segue into his second point. And that was that the Gestapo of the SJWs come after people like Kevin Hart and himself for things that they've said 15, 20 years ago and now are bringing it to bear and causing them hardship. He talked about Kevin Hart, how he had his goal in life to be the host of the Oscars. An African-American male, a black man, wanting to host the Oscars as a little boy, got his opportunity to do it, and they pulled it back because of a joke he told 15 years ago. And he goes into that. He talks about the hypocrisy of that. And so, number 2 is the fact that words are really causing people problems that were done in the past for the sake of comedy, and yet we can't say them anymore, which is causing comedy to basically dry up and be irrelevant. So I think what he's trying to do in this routine is to bring back the relevancy to let people know these are just jokes. He puts out examples as he's obviously joking. He's not being serious. He's a comedian. And so that is number 2 point there. The third point is a little bit more from my point of view. And you see here, I'm going to jump to this real quickly here on Forbes. I had it just a minute ago. Here it says that he aims to offend. Dave Chappelle does not aim to offend in this particular video. He's not trying to be offensive. I mean, yes, some of his things are offensive, but what he's trying to do is he's trying to tell the truth through the use of comedy as its cover, okay? And it totally worked because what are we doing now? I'm making a video before I go to the beach, right, about this because I think it's important enough to get it out there. People are starting to talk about Dave Chappelle again. He's being relative. When he came to the scene, he did things that were crazy. The things he did with the Ku Klux Klan and the black man who was a Klan member who was blind, and the NFL or NBA draft he did, or sports draft figures, black versus white, whatever, on and on and on. He did these hard-hitting sketches that were really in there, like, whoa, this is deep. Underneath that, there were serious lessons to learn. People like Chris Rock, when he did his first one, I think it's when he did his first opening sketch on HBO, that was a really big one. And people like George Carlin, live from New York, many others have used comedy to come up to tell truths about ourselves so we can laugh at each other and then understand what brings us together. And ultimately, that's what he's trying to do. But because he's hitting certain nerves and he brings it out, he holds no punches on this, it's becoming a problem and they're attacking him for it. But at the same time, this truth is getting out there and it's on Netflix. People can see it and people are flocking to this. So that's the third point there, is that comedy needs to be comedy, and that it needs to be a situation where we can tell truths through that and come together in agreement, even if we find the things offensive. The fourth thing I want to talk about, the fourth takeaway, is he gets into the Me Too movement, the hashtag Me Too movement. And this is pretty interesting because he's talking about that. He's talking about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be gay, to be bisexual, to be whatever. And he's not trying to offend them, but he's highlighting an example of driving in a car and talking about that, and talking about the comedians who've had problems with dealing with the hashtag Me Too movement, and how that has had backlash, and how he warned people, women, he said, about if you go too far with this, it's going to cause an issue. That drives into the abortion narrative, which I thought was pretty powerful. I'm pro-life, but he said he was not for abortion, but he's not against it either. And he highlighted an example that was really interesting, and I hadn't heard it this way put. Simply that he said, if you have the right to kill your child, the man should have the right to abandon his child. And the way he did the joke at first, people thought he was on their side of pro-choice. They were cheering. And then when he got to the point of, well, you know what? Hey, then to be fair to the men, if you choose to kill it, we don't have to worry. If you decide to keep the baby, then we don't have to pay for the baby. Now, I'm not condoning that particular line of thinking, but what he's doing is he's bringing it out there and he's putting the argument out there and saying, hey, it's either this or this. It can't be this. He's trying to be real. He's trying to keep it real to the point of he's trying to eliminate the hypocrisy in what we're seeing in society. And he's saying, hey, you guys got to figure this out for yourself. And I'm telling you right now, that particular statement was really hitting with the people in the audience, because you can see faces change if you look at the crowd as he was saying it. And so he also mentioned about, again, I mentioned about what it is to be a woman or a man, whatever. And he talked about LeBron James and how about people who have the ability or who have the right to, what they feel inside, be what they want to be. He's married to a Chinese woman or Asian woman. I believe she's Asian. And he talks about pretending to be Chinese or identifying as being Chinese. And he went off and made some faces and stuff. And it could be very offensive, right? But then he said at the end of it is, but what if that's how I feel? What if that's how I feel as a person? Then what is that, right? And then you would start to think, I know where he's going with this. And it's really powerful under the surface thing. And I'm telling you, this is why it's driving people crazy, because when you put truth out there, when you put light on something and people see it and they start thinking for themselves, you know what? Maybe we are going a little bit too far with some of this stuff and how we see things and perceive things, okay? And so I like how he did that. And lastly, on this point, he talked about LeBron James. What if LeBron James decided to be a woman tomorrow? Does it mean he can play in the NBA, or does it mean he should play in the NBA, or does it mean he should play in the WNBA? And he goes into that whole issue of, transgenders playing in women's sports, and how the hashtag Me Too movement may have had a part in driving people in this way. And so he's saying, look, if you're a feminist, he didn't say this, I'm injecting this, but he's saying if you're a feminist, you really need to think about where you're going with this, and maybe you should just chill out on some of this stuff and let things play out. And because otherwise the consequences that you think are going to happen might not happen. And lastly, he talked about for the last 20 minutes, he talked extensively on gun rights and about how the key takeaway here is that he doesn't like guns, but he has several of them. Why? Because he wants to use them for the purpose that many people want guns, is to protect themselves and protect their property and their family. And so he goes through a whole narrative of that, and he really gets you to thinking, you know what? People who are, if you're pro-gun, or if you're anti-gun, or if you want to, restrict gun use, then what do you feel about black people having guns? Okay, it's the hypocrisy there as well. And he says, you know what? I want every black person who, to register for a firearm. Okay, if you want to get rid of firearms, he was being a joke saying if blacks are armed, then all of a sudden they'll ban guns outrightly. But what the underlying message is that if you feel unsafe, you should arm yourself. I did a video on the Black Klansman earlier this year, Spike Lee, and he had a strong pro-gun message. Basically, at the end of the movie, and I'll leave a link to the review above. Basically, he has a montage about them going out into the yard with weapons to protect themselves because they feel they're being attacked by the Klan coming to their door. Okay, and so it's the same mentality that Dave Chappelle is giving here, is that you have the right to protect yourselves. Even though you might not like guns, there's still a use for them, and it's your right to do so. And so that's the 5 takeaways that I have so far in this. Again, I'm not going to necessarily recommend that you take this and see it for yourself, but if you decide to see it, that's what I think you will take away from it. If you don't decide to see it, that's what people are talking about, and that's what people are upset about. And again, why the social justice warriors, why the Gestapo, the identity politics Gestapo, is getting furious over this, because they want to change the narrative. They want you to not watch it. They want you to say he's insane. I'm seeing clips here. We're saying that what's wrong with Dave Chappelle? He's being mean. He's not doing it the way he's supposed to do it. He's being offensive. He's trying to be nasty. No, he's not. He's being who he is, but he's setting the message in a way that is using comedy as a cover to invoke and put out truths that people aren't getting because people aren't thinking for themselves. It's a group think mentality, and people are just doing what they think they're doing, what they think everyone should be doing without thinking for themselves. And that's exactly how the left wants it. That's why this channel is here, so people can start seeing things in a new light and start thinking for themselves. Do what you want, but just understand that there's an agenda out there to get you to think the way they want you to think. And so with that, hope this was a good video. And if you enjoy the content on this channel where I take culture, TV, and movies and I filter it right, please hit the like and subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss any future content. And as always, please check out some content that I have right here.